Good evening, everyone. I would like to start by thanking Mr. Acharya Prashant for accepting to deliver this interactive session on superconscious leadership from conformity to clarity. Mr. Acharya Prashant is an emerging champion of social spiritual awakening in the world today. He is an alumnus of IIT Delhi and IMA. He is also a former civil services officer. He is an acclaimed Vedanta philosopher. Apart from that, he is a veganism promoter, an environmental and science activist, and a campaigner against superstition and a champion of essential human freedom. I welcome you once again, sir, for taking your time to join us here today. The
Thank
stage
you.
is yours now.
Thank you. Thank you. We can
Yeah, we can start,
begin
sir. Like,
readings.
would you like to share a few things with the students for 5 minutes? Okay,
Repeat, please. I didn't get you.
okay. Let me start with the.
Can we increase the volume, please? Yes.
Okay, sir. Sir, we today have a panel of 7 members, and we have a few set of questions to ask you. The questions that we thought we should ask you today,
Welcome.
and we'll be going to ask you one by one with you today. And it'll I'll start the first question to you.
Yes, let's begin.
Yeah. So, sir, from what I read, karma means actions. So, what do you think consciously and subconsciously, and what one does, and so on. Our future thought process and actions depends on the karma for past and also the what we do in our present. But there is a buzzword in the society right now that karma is actually a boomerang. How is it possible to say that what goes around will definitely come back to us? And if it is true, then what is the force that is actually taking care of that particular dharma?
See, the moment you say that karma is something that uh, comes around to you, as is the popular saying, then you are postponing, relegating the fruit of your actions to the future, aren't you? Hmm? Now, first of all, then we allow ourselves this uncertainty that what we have done, its result may or may not come to us. Second, even if it is certain that the result is indeed going to be received by us, it would happen in the future, at an uncertain date in the future. And no one knows how long in the future it might take. So the entire power, the kick is quite lost. The real meaning and the real implication of karma is quite different. Vedanta and all wisdom focus not so much on the action, which is karma, but on the actor. The actor is the primary entity. If the actor is conscious, awake, he understands, then one need not bother too much about the action. One need not scrutinize the action so much. The action would naturally be all right. But if the actor himself or herself is in a hazy state, badly influenced, heavily conditioned, then one need not wait for the results of the action. I like to say that the result of the action comes even before the action, because the actor comes before the action. A bad state of the actor is in itself a lot of suffering. So you don't have to wait for the results. Let's say you go for some pathetic deed. Now, how could you have committed that action without firstly being pathetic in words, right? And if you are bad and rotten inside, then what bigger punishment can you receive? The punishment has already been received. Future becomes immaterial. One need not look at the future to ascertain whether or not the fellow was rewarded or punished for what he did, because the punishment or the reward comes before the action. However, we fail to see that because we have a very unfortunate power to be heavily acclimatized. So, we become kind of used to suffering. When you become used to suffering, you do not see that you are suffering. And it's a funny situation then. The suffering one says, I did such and such things. Now I want to test whether I would receive suffering as a result of my acts. Why do you need to receive suffering in the future? What you did arose out of your pre-existing suffering. So that's the way it is. And also, this makes various catchphrases like karmic account and karmic balance all quite meaningless, because they are all born out of a very shallow understanding of karma. Is this thing clear, or do I take a couple of more minutes to elaborate on it?
Yeah, you can elaborate on it, sir. I would like to know more about it.
See, you and I address each other as you and I. So this I is our primary identity, right? This I is the actor, thinker, doer, understander, everything. So the purpose of wisdom is to deal with this I. All that this I does, etc., comes way later. Far more example than the deed is the doer, because the doer is the I. And why are we talking so much about this I? Because that's our primary identity. You say, I am happy, I am sad. You do not say anything that does not directly or indirectly contain I. You stand at the center of your own personal universe, right? And it is for your own betterment that you turn to wisdom or to management studies or to anything else in life. Therefore, it is commonsensical that talking about actions and then the rewards of actions and then the subsequent future and such things does not make much sense. Rather, we need to come to the primary entity that concerns us, and that primary entity is the I. So we have to talk of the doer, the actor, this one that we are, the one we associate ourselves with, the one we live our lives as.
I get your point, sir.
Good evening, sir. Nirdesh this side. I would like to...
Please repeat your name.
I'm Nirdesh Shukla.
Avdesh.
Nirdesh.
Nirdesh Shukla. Yes, Nirdesh.
Nirdesh. Yes. I had a question just to start off with the topic that we have in hand of superconscious leadership.
Yes.
So I had a question like, it is very difficult for an individual like me. मतलब अगर मैं सिर्फ अपनी बात करूं तो मेरे लिए शायद कॉन्शियसनेस अचीव करना ही इन द एंटायर लाइफ टाइम अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट थिंग. Now, how practical or how difficult is it for me as an individual to even think about super consciousness when I find attaining consciousness even difficult? I might say that I'm conscious on paper, मैं paper पे लिख दूंगा मैं conscious, but I might not be, and I think I'm not even conscious about myself in the real life. So how to travel that journey from consciousness to super consciousness?
Nirdesh, there is no solid line of distinction between consciousness and super consciousness. The word super consciousness has been used by me and has been traditionally used just to emphasize the fact that it is possible to rise above ordinary consciousness. So consciousness has several levels, and we all experience those levels in our daily lives. Sometimes you are angry and you very well know that you are not as conscious in that moment as, let's say, when you are concentrating on something wonderful. You might be drunk and you very well know that your consciousness is then drowned in liquor. It's not operating properly. So it's just levels of consciousness, and you could say that the higher levels of consciousness are just being, for the sake of emphasis, called as super consciousness. Now, being a human being, you anyway will not feel easy if your consciousness is at its lower levels. What is meant by these lower levels? Freedom is our nature. No creature in the world really enjoys bondages. Lower levels of consciousness are related to a state of mental slavery. The more heavily conditioned one is, the lower is his or her state of consciousness. And the more liberated one is internally, the higher is said to be the state of consciousness. And beyond a point, we do not know what that point is. There is no real formula to put your finger on that. But beyond a certain point, you kind of become entitled to say, the fellow is super conscious. Just as you sometimes say, Superman. Right? But again, all those supermen and superheroes, they have unbelievable powers and stuff that a normal human being cannot do. In case of super consciousness, it's just the degree of internal cleansing, internal freedom that has increased. It's not as if it's a different dimension. The difference you must take as that of degree, because if you start taking super consciousness as another dimension, then you make it inaccessible to yourself. You say, well, it is something that belongs to another realm, another world, and maybe I'm not entitled to be there. But it does not belong to another realm. It belongs right to the world you and I are in. As we keep on unchaining ourselves more and more, as we keep on allowing that inner revolution, as long as we keep allowing our inner discontentment to be expressed in the form of demolition of the walls that encage us, we are moving from consciousness to a higher degree of consciousness, which you can call as super consciousness. Right. And it's not a moral or a spiritual imperative. It's an inner demand. Who would like to be fettered, caged, enslaved? Just nobody. Right. But still, almost all of us live that way. For two reasons. First, we are often ignorant of how the mind operates, what its nature is, and we keep assuming that the stuff of the mind is its own. We do not realize that the stuff that the mind is carrying are external bondages imposed upon it. Our thoughts, for example, are not really our own. Even our feelings are really not our own. All this stuff is heavily conditioned. So that is one reason, ignorance. And the second reason is fear. Even if you come to know that there is a state of slavery inside, it requires courage and sacrifice to stand up and pay the price. Right? We do not want to stand up. We fear. We don't want to pay the price. And that's the reason why this beautiful opportunity of life is often wasted. And yeah.
Right. And one more thing, sir. So, do you believe like if this is an important subject of talking about superconscious leadership, so do you think it as a need that this should also come as curriculum as part of curriculum in these schools? What are your views on it?
This should be the first thing that should be taught. This is the foundation of everything, you see, because you can teach so many skills in B school, and you can give formulae and theory and models and cases, and one is loaded with knowledge. But who is the one who would apply that knowledge? Who is the one who would practice those skills, and towards what ends? There are so many leadership courses, but lead towards what? I mean, even a Pied Piper is a leader. The question is, what must the others look up to you for? And what is really your intention in standing before others and talking to them and occupying their mind space and influencing their lives? Why do you want to do that at all? And in answering that question, you have to look at yourself. What is my relationship with the world? What is my relationship with these people I'm calling as my followers? What will be the influence of my relationship with them, my several interactions with them? And when you are clear of these questions, then your influence on the world in general is healthy. Otherwise, a majority of the leaders in every sphere of life have been just mischief makers, have they not been? Right? And in fact, it is far easier to relate to a set of followers using some mischief. You can probably connect easily to the point of slavery within the other, because that's the point where comfort lies. That's the point where habit lies. And it's difficult to relate to the other, telling the other of freedom, telling the other to stand up and pay the price and work hard and take the blows. Therefore, majority of leaders and their listeners or followers or whatever, they are in a state of bad relationship. Leaders hardly have the courage to tell the followers the truth, if at all they know the truth, firstly. And secondly, followers are not at all looking up to the leader to be told the truth. Both are in a shallow relationship where both are just entertaining each other, both have their very limited objectives that really help neither party. So that's the reason you have to differentiate a healthy relationship from that kind of a rot. So we use the term superconscious leadership. You may proceed. I mean, let this be interactive. It's not that you have to ask a question and I'll reply and then we are done with it. So I really enjoy questions and counter questions and clarifications and the entire series.
Hello. Okay, I'll go.
Priyanka, please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, sir. This is Priyanka here. So when you mentioned about superconsciousness, is there a relation between the superconscious and spirituality?
You see, between everything that is good in life and spirituality, there is bound to be a relationship. There can be nothing good in life without spirituality. So if superconscious leadership is something that has goodness, then it is bound to be spiritual. But let not the word spiritual evoke very traditional, conventional images in your mind. When I say that the superconscious leader is bound to be spiritual, you need not think that he would enter a corporate office singing bhajans. Otherwise, usually you equate spirituality with traditional religiosity. That's not the case. Is it possible to be a great student without being spiritual? No. Is it possible to be a great politician without being spiritual? No. Is it possible to be a great judge sitting in the Supreme Court without being spiritual? No. Is it possible to be a great parent without being spiritual? Well, no. Is it possible to be anything good without being spiritual? Not at all. Because you are at the center of everything that you do. If you are not all right, then how will your works, your actions, and your relationships be all right? Is it possible to be a good lover without being spiritual? No. A good mother? No. A good sister? No. Even a good scientist you cannot be if you are not spiritual.
Also, sir, just a follow-up question. We see in this, especially in this corporate world, post MBA, people run after money. Like that's the primary intention. So there is a lack, you can say, or there is an imbalance between this spirituality and the corporate rigor, you can say. So how do you balance that?
There is no need to balance. You can have as much money as is needed. But needed for what? That you must be clear about. If you have a great purpose in life, and for that you want to earn money, please go ahead and earn more than your biggest imagination. No problem. In what you have just asked is implicit an assumption that spirituality is indifferent towards money or even forbids earning money. That is not at all the case. Money is a resource. You use that resource towards something, right? Right. Money is like a gas cylinder, let's say. But if you do not know what to cook and how to cook, and you accumulate 45 gas cylinders in your kitchen, what are you doing? You're just inviting probably a huge explosion, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
So what are you cooking in the first place? Please tell me. Before you accumulate those 45 gas cylinders, what do you propose to cook? People do not know what to cook. All they have is a lot of LPG in their bank accounts. How will that help them? And to make things worse, even those gas cylinders are accumulated using very dubious ways. Let's say in the black market.
Yeah.
You go and pinch a cylinder from your neighbor. Or some poor rickshawala is there on the road carrying 5 cylinders, you slap him and take away the cylinders. And using all these things all your life, and you have not even paid the cylinder tax. You have cheated on the government also. Right?
Right.
And you have accumulated all this stuff. Now, what will you do with this? Firstly, the means of accumulation made you very, very sick internally. You wasted your life accumulating that thing. Secondly, now that the stuff is indeed getting accumulated, you know nothing about food. You do not know what is healthy for you. You do not know what to cook. And you have nobody to serve your dishes to, because you never had the time for meaningful relationships. So what will you, I mean, even if you cook a lot with those cylinders, who do you share your meals with? Is the analogy making sense? Or am
Yes.
I all around?
Yes. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Okay.
Good
Thank you.
evening,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yash. Good evening, sir. Yash here. So I've been intrigued by this thought of how the future of our lives would be. Technology as such has already impacted us in terms of.
There is echo. I'm sorry in your voice. Can you just reduce the pace of your speech? There is echo.
Yeah. Sir, I've been intrigued by how the future of our life would be. So, in terms of technology, has impacted us, the way we are living, we have been living in person, talking with each other, seeing each other. Now that has been transformed to just virtual interactions. And even further, with we have always classified people based on the kind of money they have, or classes of people. And
let me just interrupt. I'm so sorry.
yes.
There is something with the technology.
Yeah. You can remove your Bluetooth earphone and just come back again. And
Shall I go ahead then, sir?
by the time, you can go ahead, Anam. By the time.
Greetings, sir. Anam here. Thank you for joining us today, sir. So my question to you is that in a lot of your talks and even now, you redirect our focus towards ourselves as living beings. And as living beings, all of us seek contentment and happiness. So my question to you is, how does one be content without being complacent? How does one achieve that? Contentment without complacency, without becoming complacent.
See, complacency can be there only when you have just not bothered to inquire into the facts of your life. Otherwise, it is impossible to be smug and ultra confident about your state. None of us factually are in a great state internally. It's an unfortunate fact, but a fact is a fact. So there is sickness, and there is incompleteness, and there is dissatisfaction, and there is psychosis, and we are anxious, and we are afraid, and when the placement season comes, then we are jittery, and when the next fellow gets a higher pay package, then we are jealous, and we know all these things are there. And knowing all these things, if we still certify ourselves to be internally healthy, then there is something very wrong with our compass of honesty. No? Either that, or we are so afraid that we just do not even want to inquire within. Am I okay? Why did I just start trembling? I mean, standing in front of that interview room. Let's say it's a day zero company. And I suddenly find myself weak in the knees and shaking in my trousers. Why is that happening? And it's a very real happening. It's actually physical. You can't even say that it was inside, so I didn't see. It is there in the body. You cannot deny its presence. But having seen all that, if we still want to insist that we are happy and this and that, then there is a great problem. Now coming to contentment. Contentment is just the very last thing. At your stage in life, as a young person, you should have a lot of dissatisfaction. lot of dissatisfaction. Because if you settle at the point you already are, inwardly, outwardly, within, without, then you would be settling at a very suboptimal point. Your potential is far higher. So there is no point talking of contentment at this stage, because being what we are at this age and stage, we do not even know what contentment is, so we are bound to misinterpret it. So leave contentment for a later stage. At this point, rebel and rise. See what confines you and do not accept it. You getting it? Fight it out. And do not bother too much for the result. If you have given a good fight, then the word contentment can probably kick in the sense, I did the utmost I could. Beyond this, it was not possible for me to do anything. Honestly, I say that. There is nothing that I held back. I gave the fight more than what I had. Now you can probably be contented. But contented not in the sense that the fight is over. Contented in the sense that now you are ready for the next and bigger fight. Right? Final contentment is final deliverance. It is liberation, actually. So do not talk of that. When I talk to young people, it is much more advisable that they look at things and they challenge them, they question them. And believe me, and you need not actually believe me, you see this thing with your own eyes. Much in the world today needs to be challenged and demolished. Do not be easily satisfied. Just do not be easily satisfied.
Thank you, sir. Sir, and there's this follow-up question which I already had, and you touched upon that topic about the outcome, not bothering more about the outcome. However, sir, we're actually driven, we're living in this outcome-driven world, goal-oriented, outcome-driven world. So how does one achieve that detachment of giving their best while at the same time not focusing much on the results?
No, it is not detachment really. I would say you have to be in love with your war, your action. If you're challenging something, if you have taken up an enormous project, be in love with it. I'm not talking of detachment, you see. I'm talking of love here. Be in love with it and give it just everything that you have. For that, you would first of all require the work to be that enormous and that lovable. In anything that you enter, in anything that you take up, the quality of relationship must be so high that you are encouraged to, that you are left choiceless in that regard. You cannot hold yourself back. You will not say, now it is 6 p.m., so I must get up from my seat and leave. Or that in this task, I was supposed to contribute only so much and no more. Give it all that you have. And once you have given it all that you have, you will find that you will be left with very little time, space, or energy to bother about the result. See, bothering about the result is an energy-intensive affair, is it not? You may take 3 hours just preparing for an exam, and then you may keep worrying about the result for 30 days. Worrying, brooding, thinking about the result, all this consumes a lot of our lives. Now, if you are worrying about the outcome, I would say, why do you have spare time at all? Why has this time firstly not been utilized in the action itself. And if you would say, well, the deed is done, now I have spare time, I'll say, then what about the next and the higher deed? Why are you squandering away even one moment of this precious but limited life? How come you have the time, right? So when one is madly in love, when one is intensely in action, then outcome becomes immaterial. Not because one is indifferent or detached. No, it is not a case of detachment. It is a case of intense love. I gave everything that I had. Now it is difficult to differentiate between defeat and victory. You could say the one who could differentiate between these two, the one who could be affected by the outcome, is left with nothing to be affected with. He held back nothing. He gave everything that she had. Am I making sense, or is it going just too mystical?
No, it's making complete sense.
You see, think of a 6-hour Wimbledon final. Think of a 6-hour Wimbledon final, or a 7-hour match. We have had matches like that, right? The loser, believe me, does not really regret that match. I have read of champions, Grand Slam champions, who, when asked about their most unforgettable match, would not talk about one of their Grand Slam finals or semi-finals. They would talk about one match that they fought and lost. No, that is one match that they cannot forget. That is one match that brought life to them as never before. Because that was the thing that drained everything out of them. And finally, when the winning shot was played, neither side could differentiate between victory and defeat. As a spectator, you would mind who held the trophy, no? And only one of the two parties is now carrying the trophy. So you would say, oh, well, Nadal won and Federer lost. But ask them who have just played a 5-setter that extended up to 6 hours, 7 hours. Ask them, and they say, well, this is my most unforgettable match. I do not remember who won and who lost. That is something I won't remember. And the match I cannot forget. That's the way to live life. Live it so intensely that in the end, you are left with no energy to be concerned with the result. And that does not mean that you will necessarily meet defeat. Sometimes there is victory, sometimes there is defeat. But that is not the point. The point is how you have played the game. And play it with all your might. It raises you like anything. It raises you to enter a bigger game, a higher game. And that's the game.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir. Yash here. Am I audible now, sir?
Yes, you're audible, but please keep the pace of delivery.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Because
So-
there is echo. Yes.
Again, it is there.
The echo is there, but I can get you. Just speak with a little more.
Sure, sir. Sure. So, sir, I've been intrigued by, what would be the future of life, considering technology that has now come into our lives. Earlier we used to live with each other, but now we have kind of got, disparted with the technology there. COVID again, in terms of economies, it has hit the world economies, but at the same time, people have realized that life is precious, right? And nature has really limited resources. So how do you see the future of economies? Would we go to something which is a resource-based economy, or again, or how would technologies impact us or life as such?
See, in the short term, probably consumption will keep rising. But since you are talking of the COVID scenario and you are talking of probably the medium term as well, the bigger picture is that the earth just cannot sustain the kind of consumption we are exhibiting. So how do I look at the future? Well, mankind will be forced to reduce its population. You cannot continue to be 8 billion, 10 billion, 12 billion, and then say, well, in the natural course of things, we are anyway going to stabilize at 12 billion. Even 8 billion is just too much, just too much. It is too much by many times. 12 billion is unthinkable. And you're talking of 12 billion when all these 12 billion aspire to have a per capita consumption similar to that of the United States. So what are we looking at? We are looking at a scenario where nations have the population of an India and the per capita consumption of a US. Now multiply these two and what do you get? Utter tragedy, right?
Right, sir.
Neither are we ceasing to have kids, nor are we realizing that the good life does not consist of multiplied consumption. That's how the world is living. That's how even the development of countries is being indexed. No? People in which country consume how much? And you use that, you take that, and then put stuff in descending order and say, well, this country is the most advanced. Because it produces this much stuff. That stuff could be nuclear fissile material, or that stuff could be coal and iron and electricity and electronics, right? But nevertheless, you know only one way to measure development, which is production and consumption. And when it comes to production, you are not merely producing goods, you are producing babies too at an alarming rate. I mean, alarming is a gross understatement. It's a very, very lightweight word. So, I mean, what is COVID? Your population really has expanded so much. We are talking of vaccines. In the popular conversation around COVID, we talk of how governments have failed, we talk of vaccines, we talk of WHO, we talk of China, we talk of the particular Wuhan lab. But no one talks of the fundamental underlying reason. Why did man have to come in contact with that virus at all? We came in contact with that virus because we have expanded our population so much that we have to enter the jungles. We need land for every new baby that is born. And how do you get that land? You get that land only by clearing away jungles. And our greed knows no sense. So we fight with each other, and nations want to have an upper hand over their neighbor. So what do you want to do? You want to have gain of function research, which for namesake is for medical purposes. But a lot of it is actually for military purposes. Even if for just the sake of defense, still the purpose is military. You need to fight with the other because you want resources. And tomorrow, when even water will be in shortage, why will you not fight with the other? And when you fight with the other, then you don't hold back your punches, or do you? Then you will fight with the other using everything that you have. As they say, all is fair when you are. So that's the thing. Unless there is this basic recognition, which you can call as a spiritual awakening, that the good life does not consist of conspicuous consumption, we are hurtling towards a great disaster. It is already upon us. You would have read that the temperature at the place where I am sitting, day before yesterday, it was 7 degrees above normal. Now, is that normal statistical fluctuation? Obviously, it is not. It is climate crisis. And we are going to see much more of this every passing month. I'm afraid the future is not at all bright the way we are going.
And I have a follow-up on that, sir, actually, but I have to go back to history for that.
Yes,
The
please.
thing is, when we look back at the history, the science says that we are all evolved from a single-celled organism, and in order to ensure the survival of,
We have all evolved from?
can you hear me now properly, sir?
Yes, it's better.
Yeah, when we look back at history, science says that we all evolved from a single-celled organism. We still have the root for it. And in the due course, each species evolved into male and female in order to ensure the survival of that particular species. And lately, we are seeing a few trends like lesbians, gays, and so on. And the court has also approved it is their right to be in such a way. And now what I see is there are children. The reason why I'm asking this question is I've seen one YouTube video in which a YouTuber is asking questions to children, say they are in the 15 to 17 years of age, and they say that they are yet to discover whether they are a lesbian or a gay or a straight or something. And what do you see, what do you feel about this trend, sir? What is the future implication of this particular trend?
See, first of all, the bigger issue is animalistic sexuality itself. Given the way we are, given the point of evolution we are standing at, how important really is sexuality? On one hand, we are testing the limits of the universe. We are searching for extraterrestrial life. We are sending probes to distant planets. These are the kind of things we are doing. On the other hand, we are rushing after males and females as animals do. Even animals have some moderation. So whether you rush after a woman, being a man, whether you rush after a woman, or you run after a man, the thing is you are still running after a body. Are you getting it? And is the body your primary identity? The body is indeed the primary identity of animals. Or is discretion and thought and consciousness or understanding, are they your primary identity? If a man is physically alive, but just not able to think, do you even call him alive? And let's say physically he is doing everything that an animal does. He can eat, he can breathe, he can walk, he can make sounds without having any language. And he may even exhibit sexual excitation. But would you even call that person really alive if that person has no discretion, no thought? We call a person dead when he is brain dead, right? If you can, you may have everything else in the body functioning for you. But if the brain, which is related to the mind, if it is not there, then you are no more. So the body is not your primary identity. Your primary identity is consciousness. You are dead if your consciousness falls below a certain level and stays there. And your lungs could be kept going through a ventilator, but you would still not be called alive. So consciousness is who we are. And if we are conscious, then you know very well what to do with the body. The body then follows consciousness. The body then is a servant of consciousness as it should be. Instead, if you allow bodily tendencies to rule with very little consciousness, then one would do all kinds of things in life. A woman may run after a man, a woman may sleep with a woman, and you would want to think that the distinction between these two cases is the most important thing in life. I take this as trivia. If you are with an undeserving man, how is that any better than being with an undeserving woman? In both the cases, your life is being spoiled. In both the cases, you are subjecting yourself to very adverse company that would spoil your mind. And mostly this happens because of our animalistic tendencies. One person may just find that the old primitive evolutionary tendencies within are exhibiting themselves in some way. That way might be that you want to have sex with the opposite gender. That's the way Prakriti has raised you, because when you have sex with the opposite gender, then you can procreate. But what's so holy about being attracted to the opposite gender? Please tell me. In no way am I insinuating that it's holier to be attracted to the same gender. No. That's not the point. The point is, why do you want to take this issue so seriously? Because when you are taking this issue very seriously, then the real issue is getting masked. The real issue is bodily enslavement itself. Why are we so enslaved to the body? Because you see, the previous question was on economics. All this economic activity that is destroying us from within, is destroying the environment, is destroying the entire planet itself, is because of body identification. We want to consume, consume, and consume. And consciousness does not consume, the body consumes. I want more furniture, I want more clothes, I want a bigger car, I want a bigger house. Now, consciousness is hardly concerned about how many square meters you squat on. But the body looks at all that. I mean a bigger bedroom, because I have a bigger body, and such things. So when you make the straight versus gay lesbian issue very important, then indirectly you are making the body very important. Because be it the straight case or the gay case, both cases have the body at their center. Don't keep the body at the center of your thought. Seek to elevate your thought, and then you will not need any instructions or directives. Then you will know what to do with the body. Then there would be no need to form a policy, legal or moral, regarding whom to approach, who to sit with, and who to sleep with. As an adult, it's your sovereign right to decide on that. Just that right needs to be backed and exercised by a very aware mind. If you know nothing of life, if you cannot think properly, if you have no discretion, then any decision that you make in life will be flawed, including the decisions in the sexual domain.
Clear, sir.
Sir, I would like to extend this thought ahead. You mentioned about elevating our thoughts. So I think a key tool to achieve that is spirituality. But noticing, I mean, my immediate surroundings, I feel that spirituality is, or rather religiousness is misconceptualized as spirituality in the current time. So people, they, on the crux, they are religious, but they try to believe that they are spiritual, while these are very, very different things.
Yes.
Now, religiousness is very rigid, while spirituality kind of sets you free. So how do I, in my immediate surroundings?
I missed your last statement. You said something about religiousness.
Religiousness is pretty rigid, while spirituality helps us or kind of sets us free. So how do I try to bring this thought process from a religious mindset to a spiritual mindset? How can I influence others to do so? Or is it even required, or can they coexist?
As it is commonly practiced, is very outward looking. Very, very outward looking. How it looks at others, it looks at the past, it looks at practices. And it says, I will do all those things. It looks at particular books. It looks at everything outside of the looker. It need not be like that. Religion, in its classical definition, is not this. But unfortunately, this is the way religion is practiced nowadays. In fact, religion has been practiced this way more or less throughout the course of history. So that's religion. There are these rituals that have been followed since 2000 years, and I'm following them. You're not looking at yourself, you're looking at past and ritual and your forefathers and all that stuff, right? I'm a Hindu, or I'm a Muslim, or I belong to this sect, I have that belief, so I'll do all these things. That particular temple is great, so I'm going to that particular temple, right? That particular guru is wonderful, so I'm approaching that. So that's religion. Spirituality, though really it is the center of religion, yet it is very distinct from religion. Spirituality looks at oneself. Spirituality keeps all this external business aside. Spirituality says, but before I look at anything, I have to ask who is looking. Before I say anything about anything, who is this I that says anything? Is that not the first question?
Yes.
See, one can not be completely sure of anything, right? I'm looking at the screen right now. Maybe I'm dreaming. Why is it not possible? Tell me. Maybe you don't really exist. There is at least, a marginal possibility, no?
Right.
When you are in your dreams, aren't dreams all too real? As real as this moment right now?
Yes.
Is that not the case? So you can never be sure of what is happening. Let's say you're a religious person and you say such tradition has been followed by my community since so many years. Now, how do you really know? How can you be sure that this tradition has indeed been followed in this particular way? You cannot be sure of anything. You cannot be sure of your thoughts. You cannot be sure of your beliefs. But there is one thing that you can be sure of. That if there is thought, there is a thinker. That if there is suffering, there is a sufferer. That if there is a question, there is a questioner. So you, this entity that asks, listens, suffers, feels confused, falls, rises, this entity is the only thing you can ever be sure of. Everything else might be a mirage, a dream, an apparition. You don't know. That's the point spirituality starts from. Spirituality says, I'll start from the point, the only point I can be fully confident of, and that is I. About everything else, I'll be a little skeptical. I'm not rejecting everything else. I just want to doubt. I want to question whether things really are as they appear. Right? But before I say whether this thing is really as it appears to me, I have to test my eyes, right? This thing comes later. My eyes come first. Right. When you cannot look at this towel properly, do you go and get this towel tested, or do you go and get your eyes tested? Right. So that's the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is just too much concerned with the towel. Spirituality says, I need to get my eyes tested. The eye need to be tested. Right. Are you getting it? Right. So, though really spirituality is at the center of all religion, religion is the circumference, the periphery, that is supposed to gradually draw the religious one to spirituality. But that often not is the case. One gets caught at the periphery. One remains at the circumference. Right. All his life. In fact, one starts resisting the center itself. Right. There is often a great conflict between the spiritual mind and the religious mind. In fact, really spiritual people have been badly persecuted by none other than religious people. The Sufis, for example. Mm-hmm. And even in India, if you are really a spiritual person, then you will find that the community that opposes you the most is not of atheists. Right. It is of religious people. They will be the ones who would be opposing the really spiritual person the most, which is an unfortunate thing, because the way religion was designed, it was designed to gradually make a person spiritual. Right. Today, the situation is that these are not in sync or harmony with each other. Rather, these two have become greatly separated. Some fundamental questions that you need to ask, maybe a religious person, maybe they might work. Depends a lot on chance and your effort and the intensity. Having done all that you have been doing all your life, are you really at peace? Because that's the only thing that you want, no? Right. You see, if you are at peace, do you really need to follow any religious practices? If you are joyful, then the ultimate has already been achieved. Then do you really need to remember and chant verses? You don't, right? So have you really achieved something? In the moment of your crisis, does your religious practice really help you? Do your beliefs really stand the scrutiny of time and circumstances? Right? But there has to be a sharp and smart occasion to do all those things. As they say, strike the iron when it is hot. Right. So it is only at certain opportune times that you can ask these questions. Otherwise, usually the traditionally religious mind is just too unavailable to any kind of inquiry.
Right. Thank you.
धन्यवाद आचार्य प्रशांत जी, हमारे लिए समय निकालने के लिए।
जी।
अभी जैसे हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि कोरोना काल चल रहा है और जीवन का भी काफी लॉस हुआ है और जीवनी का भी काफी लॉस हुआ है। काफी फैमिली को भी मॉर्निंग फेज में है और ये काफी छोटे नहीं बहुत बड़े पैमाने पे हो रहा है, बहुत सारे लोग हैं। तो ये क्या एक कलेक्टिव मॉर्निंग जो हो रही है, ये लोग का जो स्टेट है, ये एक बड़े परिवर्तन की तरफ भी इशारा कर रहा है? और अगर ऐसा कुछ है,
आपने बॉन्डिंग कहा या मॉर्निंग कहा?
मॉर्निंग का सर।
हाँ ठीक है,
मॉर्निंग बहुत सारे लॉसेस हुए हैं, इस कारण से काफी फैमिली मॉर्निंग में है। तो ये एक जो कलेक्टिव इतने लोगों के साथ इतने लॉसेस हुए हैं, ये एक तरफ चेंजेस का भी इशारा करता है, एक बड़े चेंज की तरफ। आपके हिसाब से ये क्या बड़ा चेंज हो सकता है?
देखिए, वो बड़ा परिवर्तन तो तभी आएगा जब हमें ये समझ में आए कि ये आपदा अकस्मात बिल्कुल नहीं थी। लेकिन अभी जिस तरह की चर्चा चल रही है, वो जो पूरा वार्तालाप है कोरोना के इर्द गिर्द, वो मुझे तो बहुत उम्मीद नहीं देता कि हम थोड़ा भी सचेत हो रहे हैं। राजनीतिक दृष्टि से कौन उत्तरदायी है इसकी बात हो रही है, कौन से देश ने क्या किया इसकी बात हो रही है, क्या ये चीन की साजिश थी, वहाँ पर फॉसी का इसमें क्या रोल था, क्या ट्रंप ने जो कहा था वो बात बिल्कुल सही थी, किस प्रदेश में टीकाकरण किस गति से चल रहा है, क्या टीकाकरण के आंकड़ों से छेड़छाड़ की गई है, क्या मौत के आंकड़े जितने प्रकाशित हुए उससे 4 गुना ज्यादा थे। इन सब विषयों में हमारी ज्यादा रुचि है। जो मूलभूत कारण रहा है इस त्रासदी का, उसकी बात करता मुझे कोई दिखाई नहीं देता। और त्रासदी का जो मूलभूत कारण है, वो निकट भविष्य में ही ऐसी कई अन्य त्रासदियां खड़ी करने वाला है। हम अपने दुख से भी कुछ सीखने को जैसे राजी ही नहीं हो रहे। आपने कहा कि एक संयुक्त विषाद है, दुख है, पीड़ा है। नहीं, पीड़ा तो है, लेकिन क्या हम उस पीड़ा के मर्म तक जा रहे हैं? क्या हम ये समझना चाह भी रहे हैं कि वो पीड़ा आई ही क्यों? उदाहरण के लिए कोई कह रहा है कि अगर ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर 4 घंटे पहले मिल जाता तो मेरे भाई बच जाते। तो एक तल पर ये बात सही भी है, ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर अगर थोड़ा जल्दी मिल जाता तो शायद वो बच जाते। लेकिन उन्होंने अपने भाई की मृत्यु का बड़ा ही एक छोटा, संकीर्ण, नैरो कारण पकड़ लिया है। कह रहे हैं ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर नहीं मिला इसलिए मृत्यु हुई। भाई पूरी बात क्या है ये आप जानना नहीं चाहते? मृत्यु के इस क्षण में तो कम से कम सच्चाई के प्रति थोड़े उपलब्ध और ईमानदार हो जाओ। पूरी बात जो है वो हम नहीं समझना चाहते। पूरी बात ये है कि हम जैसे जी रहे हैं, जो हमारी पूरी विचारधारा है, व्यक्तिगत और वैश्विक दोनों एक सी हैं लगभग, उसका परिणाम थी ये महामारी। है ये महामारी। अभी हमें नहीं पता कितनी और लहरें आनी बाकी हैं, हमें नहीं पता अभी कितने म्यूटेशन, कितने वेरिएंट्स, हम कुछ नहीं जानते। और ये सब यूं ही नहीं हुआ है। अभी आप जंगलों में और घुसोगे, क्योंकि जंगलों में घुसना आपकी अनिवार्यता बन गई है। आपको पैसे कमाने हैं। पैसे कहां से आएंगे जब तक आप प्रकृति का दोहन नहीं करोगे? आप कह रहे हो कि मैं अब उदाहरण के लिए एमबीए करके बाहर निकला हूं तो मुझे भी अब गुड लाइफ जीनी है। उस गुड लाइफ का मतलब क्या? उस गुड लाइफ का मतलब यह है कि मुझे भी कार्बन का उत्सर्जन करना है, मुझे भी पृथ्वी पर 2-3 लोगों की तादाद और बढ़ानी है, मुझे भी एक घर खड़ा करना है जिसमें कि इतने एयर कंडीशनर चलेंगे, मेरे पास भी एक बहुत बड़ी गाड़ी होनी चाहिए जो इतने संसाधन खाएगी। मैं भी बार बार विदेश यात्राएं करूंगा और मैं भी अब और बेहतर खाना खाऊंगा, जिसका अक्सर ये मतलब होता है कि अगर मैं शाकाहारी था तो मांस खाऊंगा, और अगर मैं पहले से मांस खाता था तो अब मैं तरह तरह के एग्जॉटिक मीट्स खाऊंगा। जब तक गुड लाइफ, जब तक विकास की हमारी अवधारणा ऐसी है, जब तक हमारे लिए डेवलपमेंट का मतलब ही यही है कि अब कौन कितना भोग रहा है, कितना कंज्यूम किया जा रहा है, तब तक ऐसी महामारियां एक के बाद एक आती रहेंगी। ये जो हुआ है वो ऐसा नहीं हुआ है कि अरे धोखे से वायरस लीक हो गया तो बेचारा दुनिया में लग गया। पिछले 20 सालों में ही देखिए ना, एबोला है, सार्स है, और आपको इन सारे मामलों में कुछ साझा नजर आएगा, और उनमें साझा ये है कि उत्तरदायी हम ही हैं, हमारी कोई करतूत है जो हम पे टूट के गिरती है। प्रकृति अब सिर्फ चेतावनी नहीं दे रही है, वो सजा दे रही है, और हम प्रकृति से बड़े नहीं है। देखिए इतनी सारी प्रजातियां हैं जीवों की इस पृथ्वी पे, करोड़ों अरबों। प्रकृति के लिए आप कुछ खास हो नहीं, आप तो एक नई ताजी छोटी सी प्रजाति हो। आप मिट भी जाओगे, प्रकृति को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, वो अपना खेल आगे बढ़ाती रहेगी। कुछ करोड़ साल बाद फिर हो सकता है इंसान जैसा या इंसान से बेहतर कोई और जीव पैदा हो जाए। हम ही अपने आप को बहुत बड़ा माने बैठे हैं। तो जब तक हमें वो ईमानदारी नहीं आती और नजर की वो सफाई नहीं आती कि हम साफ साफ देख सकें कि हमने किया क्या, तब तक समझिए कि ये जो हमने पीड़ा सही है, अभी लाखों लोगों की मौत हुई है, वो पीड़ा भी व्यर्थ गई हम पर। कि जैसे हमें समझ में ही नहीं आया कि ये सजा हमें दी क्यों गई। स्कूल में कुछ ऐसे होते थे ना बच्चे, उनको टीचर क्लास के बाहर खड़ा कर देती थी, कभी मुर्गा बना के, कभी हाथ ऊपर करके। वो फिर वापस आते थे, फिर उपद्रव में जुट जाते थे, बल्कि और ढीठ हो जाते थे। तो वैसे ही है, जितनी सजा मिलती है हम उतने ढीठ होते जा रहे हैं। और फिर माफी तो यहाँ किसी के लिए नहीं है ना, जो जैसा होता है वो वैसा पाता है। मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगेगा अगर इतनी सजा पाकर भी हम कुछ सीख लें, हम सुधर जाएं। पर फिलहाल मुझे वैसी सीख कहीं उठती हुई दिखाई नहीं दे रही है। कारण यही है, जो पूरा कन्वर्सेशन है कोरोना के इर्द गिर्द, उसमें कहीं भी मूल कारणों की चर्चा नहीं हो रही है।
Hello, sir. This is Jagan from Chennai. Sir,
सुन नहीं पाया नाम आपको।
I'm Jagan from Chennai.
Jagan.
Yes.
Jagan.
So I am always a person who tries to hear something or hear some philosophies in class and try to apply the same real life situations. So during one of our classes, I came across a philosophy called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The self-actualization need was placed at the top of the pyramid. And I think for many of the individuals, including me, our long-term goal is esteem or security based. Like if you ask me, I will be saying I want to become a CEO of a company, which is a security based or esteem based need. But you know, the self-actualization need is understanding that okay, we have to live our present lives to the fullest, but that won't be a long-term goal for many people. Do you think having long-term goal of attaining self-actualization, which is internal spiritual, is important? Do you think creating awareness on self-actualization for an individual from an early age is important? Because when I'm studying my school days, when people were asking me about the long-term goal, I'll be saying I want to become an engineer. When I was doing engineering, when people was asking, I told I want to become a manager. When I'm doing my manager study, I told I want to become a CEO. But you know, in this routine of way of life, I never thought, okay, the spirituality need or you know, self-actualization or self-realization is a need that I should be meeting in a long term. So what do you think about this?
See, the way Maslow constructed his pyramid is good, nicely indicative, but not very exact. Self-actualization is not something that stands distinct from all your other needs. The way that pyramid stands is, you say, once all my lower needs are satisfied, only then I come to self-actualization.
Yes, yes.
Right? So you have kept sex actualization at the top, and you say food and security and self-esteem, and only then self-actualization. No, that's not how it actually is. Maslow did a great job, but he was not quite there. Self-actualization is not the top of the pyramid. It is the foundation of everything that you do. It is the foundation of your activity, even when you are fulfilling your lower needs. Let me give you an example. You want to go for self-esteem.
Yes, sir.
Why do you want to be known in the society as someone important or respectable? You want to be known that way because you think that being known that way would give you self-actualization. So when you are going for self-actualization, you are actually going, when you are going for self-esteem, you are actually going for self-actualization through self-esteem. Not getting it. So given we are, as a conscious organism, our only deep need is self-actualization. All other needs are just precursors and mediums. Even we eat to be alive, to be self-actualized. It's not as if eating and self-actualization are separated by a mile, like in the pyramid that you find in your textbooks. If self-actualization were not possible at all, then you would not even eat, believe me, because you're not an animal. An animal has no respect for any actualization, so it will continue eating throughout its life with no concern for, no idea of, no craving for anything like self-actualization. No. But you're not an animal. So why do you eat? You eat to be alive, to be actualized one day. You may not know that, but that's the case. Similarly, why do you have relationships? Why do you have money? Why do you want respect? All these things you want either because you think that they lead to self-actualization, or sometimes you want them as a proxy to self-actualization. Many people do that. You getting it? Self-actualization in spiritual terms is the state of liberation. In traditional religious terms, you could call self-actualization as God attainment. A religious vocabulary would say God attainment. The spiritual mind would say liberation. Does it not happen that when you get your dream job or when you get your dream partner, you yell out, well, I got my God. तुझ में रब दिखता है. Now what is this going on? You are thinking that you have attained self-actualization via a relationship, via security in relationship. No?
Yes.
Security needs. It's just that you have been deluded. You do not know that this is not the way. So in Maslow's thoughts, the thing is sequential. You have one, you have the other, you have the next one, the next one, and finally self-actualization. The indic realization, the spiritual understanding is way deeper and far better. It takes actualization as the very bottom of the pyramid. Not even the bottom, because if you say it's the bottom, then you will say it is not really intimately connected to the top. You take self-actualization as present at every level of the ladder. Whatever you are doing, it is really for self-actualization, directly or indirectly, because you are a human being. And a human being lives only for one purpose, whether he knows it or not. Even the worst rascal, even the most unconscious person is actually living only for actualization, just that he does not know it. Why do you wake up in the morning? Don't say you wake up to attend classes. You actually wake up to be actualized, just that you don't know it. Why are you having this conversation? Why do you even watch a movie? Why do you commit a heinous crime? Even that you do just for self-actualization. Because the one within that you can call as the I or the ego is crying out for fulfillment. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir. Yeah. After after your discussion, I'm seeing the self-actualization as a agile. It's an iteration. We don't bridging every needs. It's an iteration.
You need to be slower. There is echo. Yes.
It is like an iteration. Whenever there is an iteration, iteration of meeting the needs.
Iteration.
So iteration of meeting the needs. So whenever there is an iteration of meeting the needs or fulfilling the needs, the self-actualization is like a sprint. So it is bridging. Yes. So it's a meeting happening in between. It's a bridge that makes this. That's the source of all this fulfillment.
That's the best word. It is the source of all this and also the purpose of all this. Everything arises from that. Whatever you do, your entire universe, all your deeds, thoughts, purposes, motivations, all arises from there, and all arises for the sake of actualization. So it is both the earth and the sky. And in between the earth and the sky, you are doing all your miscellaneous activities and mischief.
Yes.
Okay. So right now, after listening to all this conversation, I had a very basic question. And when it comes to the religion versus spirituality debate. So when it comes to religion, we can say that who created us? There is a question. So religious people will say God created us. There is someone who is up there, he created us, like that. But what is the real answer for that in spirituality? And again, why are we here? What are we doing here? And how this bodily form actually starts?
Say, are we really anywhere? First of all, let me answer that. The religious person says, who created us and what is the purpose of this life? Do you see the implicit assumption here? First of all, it is believed that you exist. When you are confident that you exist, you ask, who created me? Who created my body? Who created the trees, the rivers, the building, whatever, the entire universe? And when you are confident that you know what life is, then you ask, what is the purpose of life? So the religious question is based on some very dubious assumptions. The spiritual approach is far more rigorous. The spiritual mind does not ask who created us or who created me. The spiritual mind asks, do I exist at all? If I exist at all, only then the question of my creator becomes relevant. For the creator to be there, first of all, there has to be the creation, right? Now you do not know for sure whether even the creation exists at all, or it exists in the way you think it does. Okay, take this example. I'm drunk, let's say. And I ask, who created these 8 fingers? I'm drunk and I'm asking, who created these 8 fingers? Now, should I answer this question, or should I first look at my own state? The religious mind does not understand that it is drunk and is asking about the fingers that do not exist at all. Does the world even exist in the way you think it does? Okay. Excuse me. In your life, has anything ever been, even one single thing ever been the way you have thought it is? Are even your parents really the way you take them to be? Are even you the person you think you are? So we do not know anything for sure. When we do not know anything, then we have to focus on the knower. Let me first of all look at the knower, correct him, liberate him, purify him. Only then I am entitled to talk about anything else. Otherwise, I am taking undue liberties. The 8th finger. And when nobody is able to tell me who made the 8th finger, then I come up with a story. One day, God, after his lunch, was in a particularly bad mood. So he called his pet dog, clipped his tail, and with the tail he made my 8th finger. And religious literature is agog with such stories, is it not? This happened, that happened, then God did this, then God did that, and finally man was made. Spirituality does not live in stories. Spirituality is extremely rigorous. Very, very rigorous. It is more scientific than science itself. Please wait. Before I answer the question, may I please ask who is questioning? It starts from there. And believe me, it ends there as well. It is so rigorous. It has no scope for entertainment. It does not allow you to roam astray and talk about this and that, this planet, this seed, that food, this particular auspicious day, sun and moon, and 1,000 other things. Spirituality has nothing to do with all that.
Understood, sir. So thank you so much. I think I've got answers for all the questions that I had for quite some time. So I think it's time to wrap up this session. So I would like to pass this on to Anam Gwaluri to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sarvesh. Thank you, Acharya ji, for joining us today and delivering this enriching talk. You covered a lot of topics and had the patience to answer our questions around, variety of topics ranging from the spiritual mind to superconscious leadership, challenging our inhibition and surpassing them to become better humans, and so on and so forth. So in this regard, I, on behalf of XRI EXPGDM 2021-2022 batch, thank you for being with us today. It was a sheer delight to interact with you, and we wish you a very happy weekend, sir.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Wish you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.